Hey everyone, we're back again for another episode of Lessons of the Woods by 10 Point Whitetails. I'm your host, Dylan Porter, and with me I have not Steve Daniels, but my co-host, Kyle Weber. And this episode is sponsored by sponsored by Wallhanger Taxidermy of Cable, Wisconsin. We are 10 Point Whitetails. One day I'll learn how to speak English, and that'll make this whole podcasting thing go a lot better. But today is not that day. But today, however, is October 4th. And Kyle, what's going on October 4th at midnight?
I don't have a clue, Dylan, what's happening on October 4th.
November 4th.
But November 4th at 11:59, the 10 Point Whitetails online buckboard registration ends. So if you're reading, it's 7 o'clock right now. We're talking in the future here. It is 7 o'clock right now. You're watching our podcast because we're awesome and you love what we do here. So I just want to remind you that 10 Point Whitetails is the last night to sign up for the 10 Point Whitetails online buckboard.
Have till midnight tonight.
11:59, and we're shutting it down
on November 4th.
Yep. So
you're listening to this on the 5th. In your tree stand, because we know you love us. You're going to listen to us in your tree stand. You're not going to pay attention to the woods. Minnesota Rifle Opener, you're listening to Lessons of the Woods. If you're listening to this in the morning, November 5th, it's too late. You can't enter. You can enter next year. But November 4th, before midnight, you can sign up to register on the buckboard. Really simple to do.
And don't forget, $5 to register doesn't mean you have to harvest an animal to win any of the prizes. We got a ton of prizes to give away. It's not going to be based on harvest. The top 3 positions are based on a harvest, but the rest are going to be completely random draws through a number generator. So if you've registered, you've paid your $5, you have a chance to win a lot of things. So it's worth the $5 to probably potentially get free donation or free. Yeah.
So make sure you get that done. Let's pause this. Go do it. We'll wait. Come back. Okay, now that you've entered the buckboard, we're going to continue. So tonight, we are going to be talking about sign and patterning. Those are points 7 and 8 on the 10 Point Whitetails 10-point system. So sign sounds pretty straightforward, Kyle. Where are we going with sign?
Sign, and I'm going to directly talk about scrapes.
Okay.
Rubs. Now, scrapes are what are on the ground, the loose soil that is tore up that you'll find on mostly deer trails, logging trails. Mm-hmm. The rub is what's on the tree next to it or standalone in the woods. We're going to talk about bedding, the difference between a buck bed and a doe bed. Talking deer poop. What does that tell you? Trails and how to read that stuff, and how you can read the woods and how these deer move through, how these deer operate without the deer being there. Mm-hmm. So deer sign will tell you a lot of things, but that also changes from summer to fall to rut. So it's a different book to read every time. So
it is. And the bare bones easy thing that sign tells you is, hey, there's deer here. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But different times a year, different things. So, there's a community, there's what's referred to as a community scrape. And a community scrape is a scrape that is operated sometimes all year. You can have a scrape. And what scrapes are used for? If you haven't seen one or haven't heard much about them, scrapes are when a deer rubs, they peel the leaves away, they scrape up the dirt, hence why it's called a scrape. There'll normally be a branch hanging up above the scrape, and that's a licking branch. They like to rub they have scent glands in the corner of their eyes that they like to rub on the side of their face. That's not working at all, unfortunately. Wait, hold it back. There we go. So that's a scrape right there. For those of you watching or listening to this on Spotify, go to the video. Kyle showed a picture of a scrape. So they have a gland in the corner of their eye that has their own unique scent on it. They want to rub that on the licking stick. They'll put that stick in their mouth. They'll chew on it a little bit, release some sap on the stick, and then they'll rub it on their face. And then they'll pee in the scrape. So what a scrape is basically, it's a white-tailed deer's version of a billboard, bulletin board, or a phone book. Basically, it says, hey, how are you? This is me. I come through here sometimes. Does will use it. Bucks will use it. I think even coyotes will use it sometimes. Not like scrape it, but they'll pee on it. I know some hunters say, oh, I like to pee in my buck scrapes because it gets them mad. I don't know if it does or not, but it doesn't make them stop using it. So scrapes are just a really good way for a whitetail buck to do inventory on the does in his area. So closer to rut, you find more scrapes, more active scrapes. We've had scrapes on Dad's farm. We've had scrapes up to 8 feet long, all tore up, great big area. Because the bucks are like, hey guys, this is where you need does, you need to pee here. I need to figure out what's going on. So come here, come on, girls. Yeah, so it's a calling. It's a phone book. This is me. Here I am. This is what you need to know about me. If you're hunting a scrape, bucks normally will have a time of day where they go by that scrape every day up until the rut. Sometimes it might be 2 o'clock in the morning, might be 6 o'clock in the afternoon, but they have, and that leads us right into patterning too, which we're kind of going to mesh these 2 points together. You can use a scrape to pattern a buck quite easily, in my experience. They'll come in at a specific time of day, nearly every day, waiting, hoping the doe pees on it. So if you're using a fresh doe urine, go sit by your scrape, spray the scrape down, spray a little bit in the leaves, and set up to bow hunt that scrape 30, 40 yards away. And if the buck isn't coming by during the day while you're there, you're okay. Come back the next day. He might not be that far away because he's like, hey, 10 does, if you're using mixed doe urine, 10 does or 1 doe showed up overnight. I'm not going that far. I got to figure this out.
Interesting thing I learned last week. Not learned, but I caught on my Tacticam. Last weekend, 2 little spikes spent 4 hours in front of my camera rubbing foreheads. Two spikes rubbing foreheads, 4 hours on my trail camera. I was exhausted. It just bing, bing, bing. Anyways, they spent 4 hours. You can tell they're getting a little tough. They're trying to feel what their brother or their cousin can do, and they're testing each other, and they're kind of working out. Anyways, I watched 4 hours of that, go to bed, wake up in the morning, look at my pictures. This little spike. I'm not saying 2 to 3 inch spikes, the littlest things in the world. This buck walks in, comes down, and you can see him. He tears up a spot right on camera. I personally think a natural scrape has a different effect than a mock scrape that we make. I really do believe they know it shouldn't be there, or they know why it shouldn't be there. We don't know that, but a natural scrape screams way more than a mock scrape. I think mock scrapes work. I do think they're effective use of signage or creating attraction, but a real deer-made scrape is more effective. My opinion, tear me up for that. But this little 3-inch spike came in, tore up a scrape, and left. So he just knew those 2 bucks fought overnight for 4 hours. He comes walking in, it's a different spike, and makes a scrape. Within an hour, I had a nice 8-point, walk in, hit that scrape, and he worked it. The little spike maybe spent 5 minutes. I have enough pictures to tell me that that other buck spent 20 to 25 minutes working that scrape. There's a picture of him when we posted on Facebook. You see him working it. He stretches his neck up. He's licking and chewing on that branch, and he works that scrape again, circles the other side, works it. I'm sure he's peeing on it. But he works it for 25 minutes. Into the daylight. I mean, this is one night's action in front of this camera. It was amazing. But that little spike made that natural scrape, and that attracted another buck. And that scrape has been hot. The does are in it. The bucks are in it. I've noticed since the bigger buck has worked the scrape that the spikes are not working it. They come in and you can see them. You'll even see a picture of him. The spike's ears are back and his head's up, which is not normal. Usually if they're trying to be aggressive, their ears are back, head is down, hair's puffed up. The spike's not doing it. Ears are back, head's up away from it, because he knows Big Daddy, Big Louie is over here. This is my spot. These does are mine. But that's what a scrape can do. My tree stand is 35 yards off that. I can get them coming. I can get them going. But I'm not saying shouldn't use mock scrapes. I'm not even saying you shouldn't use doe urine. I think both of those are good factors. But the fact that I got that little spike to do it on my camera, totally natural, I'm super excited to see what happens. And this video podcast comes out a little later, so hopefully I have some results from that before this. But that scrape naturally happens, and right now these bucks are fighting each other, arguing, testing each other's waters, picking on each other, and these scrapes and stuff that we can see. So during the summer, it's harder to see these signs. Right now is a great time to be like, fresh rub, fresh scrape. There was a deer right here. During the summer, it's a little harder. Last year's rub, last year's scrape. But after a year's cycle of knowing how these deer operate, during the summer, you look for trails, tracks, deer poop. Right now, you're looking for scrapes and rubs. And in the winter, you're looking for, you're looking for bedding area in the winter. It really helps you. That information, those books are different throughout the year. So, but it was great to see on that camera capture all of that. Spikes fighting, spike make a scrape, bigger buck make it, and then the spikes be like, I'm gonna pass. I'm not gonna mess with him. So that's a really cool experience, and it's just education for us. So
real easy way to see who the dominant buck in the area is with that particular camera setup you got going, because those spikes are definitely not dominant over that bigger buck. They're gonna let's not get our butts kicked today. We don't want to make him mad.
But you grew up with brothers. I mean, if you and I don't know which one you fought with more, but let's just say you and Brody are fighting, and then Austin, who's at that time 16 and bigger, stronger, tougher than you. If you two are wrestling and he walks in, you guys are gonna knock it off. I got to imagine. Maybe not.
Depends on the attitude, but
sure. Yeah. And that's how deer operate, and that's a whole behavior thing. Is another podcast, but it's cool to see these interactions happen. And every time you can capture something on a camera, whether it's video or photo, it's just a little bit of information to help you notice these signs. Because now I know how that scrape that I seen, how it got there, and how deer are operating around that scrape naturally. I hadn't been in there, so.
And what's really interesting is this is in a food plot, right?
This one is not in a food plot, nor is it anywhere close. So I have permission to hunt a different chunk of property.
Oh, okay.
Miles away.
So it is in the woods where they would normally make a scrape.
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say if it's in a food plot where they shouldn't even be making a scrape in the first place, but it's a dumb yearling buck who did a dumb thing, but everybody's using it. That's where I was gonna go with that. But since it is in the woods where they should make a scrape, different story.
Yeah. No. This chunk of property is pretty sweet, and we got more, sign to bring up, but
good.
This spot's pretty cool.
So, I think we covered scrapes pretty good. We'll move on to rubs. Rubs are normally made. Let's see if this can work again. There we go. That's a nice rub right there. So rubs
I'd be pretty excited.
That I would be too. Rubs are made by bucks rubbing on trees. It's plain and simple. They're rubbing their antlers on trees. They're trying to get some coloration on their antlers. They want to take the velvet off. So the first time they make a rub, they take the velvet off. And beyond that, they want to get some darker coloration on their antlers and different smells on their antlers. And they also want to build their neck muscles. So when they're rubbing on trees, they're learning their antlers because they can't feel them anymore. So they need to know, hey, where is each point? How do I use that point to better drive it through a buck's rib cage to kill them? How do I best use my tools? So they're practicing with their weapons. Just like you practice shooting bow, they're practicing with their antlers to better kill other bucks during the rut. So in doing so, they apply darker color to the bottom of the antlers. They rub all those bumps on the bottom of the antlers smooth. So if you take this set of antlers behind me, was cut off pretty early in a buck's after he shed his velvet. So there's still some velvet on here on the back side. You can see it there. So if you're watching if you're watching this on Spotify, pull up the video version so you can see it a little bit better. But they all have these bumps right on the back side of the antler or on the front side of the antler. And we found out really quick when we were, see there, it all wore out there on a different buck.
Mm-hmm.
But we found out really quick when we started cutting antlers off of bucks, we would go grab onto yearling or 2-year-old bucks and cut their antlers off week after they shed their velvet. Their antlers at that time, all those burrs on the bottom of the antler are razor sharp. And we'd come away, our hands would just be bleeding everywhere. Learned real quick, gotta wear gloves when you're engaging that particular activity, because they rub all those smooth over the course of the fall. And they're rubbing so much, they're building their neck muscles. People always say, oh, their necks are big because it's the rut. They're swollen. Nope, it's not swelling. It is pure muscle. They start a weight training program from September 1st to November 5th that is just insane. They're building their neck muscles every day. I got some pictures I should try to find and post sometime, but we had a buck named Stormin' Norman. Not a terribly big body deer, usually 220, 230 pounds pre-rut. During the rut, he'd get up towards 300 pounds. And he'd put on 75 pounds of neck muscle. His neck and shoulders just jacked. I mean, he looked like the best bodybuilder out there because he's rubbing and killing trees. So, a rub can tell you a couple of different things. Number one, the bigger the tree, the bigger the buck. And that's plain and simple, easy to say. Because if you got a yearling buck that's only 3 or 4 inches wide, well, he can't rub on a 5-inch tree. If you got a 4-year-old buck that's 20 inches wide, he can rub on as big a tree as he wants. So the wider the buck, the better the bigger tree he's going to be able to rub on. The more worked in the tree, the more aggressive the buck. If he just took off the first layer of bark, he's not that aggressive. If he took off 4 or 5 layers deep, if he's wore out a 1/2 inch, that's a pretty big deer, pretty aggressive deer. And Kyle doesn't like this one, but you can tell what time of day.
I like it.
You can tell. You can tell what time of day a buck made a rub based on what side of the tree it's on. For instance, if it's facing a food plot, if you can see the rub from your food plot, that rub was probably made in the morning because the buck's going into the woods. If it's on the other side of that tree, so you can see the food plot and the rub at the same time, it was probably made at night because he's walking towards the food plot. You can tell which direction they're going too. If you can see a rub and then you can see another one, that's the way the buck's going. It's not all rocket science here. Some of it's pretty straightforward and logical.
I love it, and it's as funny as it is. Sometimes it's that simple,
and sometimes it's useful.
If you walk so what we have by us is like old logging roads. It's overgrown, but it's kind of a clear, and deer like that. Deer like to travel those easy corridors.
Mm-hmm.
When I found the scrape location that I'm talking about, I walked that trail. I found 2 scrapes. And the little bush that was right next to it got tore up. You can see the branches are broke. You can see a little bit of raw bark and stuff. And you can see that he went from east to west, for example. I know which way he headed. It wasn't there yesterday. It's there today. So I know this morning he was over there. Tonight he's over here. I mean, it isn't rocket science. It's plain and simple that way. But when it comes to the rub, yeah, you're right. I mean, if it's a 12-inch tree round and it's rubbed, that buck has to be that wide. And you can tell by the height too. And I wish I had the picture. I seen it online. Somebody shared it. It's a really good justification. You can kind of look at a rub and go, this buck's antlers look like this. And it's basically where it's really tore up. And that's why anybody that's watching the YouTube, I show this little guy. He's a little buck, yearling, 2-year-old maybe. Dylan, you can argue about that. But if you can see here, it's wore smooth. He puts that branch or that tree right there and rubs it, and he rubbed it smooth. This isn't going to be very aggressive on the tree bark. This guy here scores about 140 inches. Not only is the beating amazing on his antlers, but it's way more aggressive. And at one point it was extremely sharp, like Dylan's talking about. But what I want to point out is if you look at a rub, you look at the height of it. You can look at the height and think about his head going down and his nose touching the ground, and this getting pushed with every muscle he has. His neck is the size of a linebacker's thigh. So much power is in that neck. I think Dylan's the one that quoted that statement. But you told me that.
I never put it that way, like a linebacker's thigh. But a whitetail buck can lift 2 to 3 times their own body weight with their neck and shoulders.
So they have a lot of torque in there. So when he puts this base, with all that beating, at that point it's sharp, into that tree, he's tearing that up. So you can look at it and go, okay, it's 8 inches off the ground. Right? So it's 8 inches off the ground. That means, his nose is usually 7.5 from nose to eye. So his base is a little bit higher. So maybe it's not 8, maybe it's 12. But that's where the rub starts. And it goes up 18 inches. But then above that, there's these pecker tracks and digs and scratches above that main kind of rub area. And that is actually the points, because he'll go like this and he'll go sideways and get that tree in here if he can. Mm-hmm. But these points are poking up there because he's trying to work this. This is the leverage. It's the lever for that buck to make that buck rub. So my point with that is you can stare at a buck rub. Get down and look at it. His up and down motion shows that rub. Mm-hmm. And then there's the points. And you can kind of figure out, is his tines 6 inches or his tines 12 inches? If that stroke of rub is 18 inches and then 12 inches above that is the pecker tracks from the tines, he's got some big tines, tine length there. So these rubs will tell you, in a way, is he this wide? Is he this wide? Is he 20 inches? Is he this tall? But,
I never actually thought of that.
Well, go to your dad's. and I mean, you have great pictures of you next to these rubs.
Yeah.
And there's a difference, too. In that case, these same trees get worked every year. So it's
But still, I never thought about the tine length aspect of it. And I don't know why I've never thought of that or never had anybody say something about that before, but I am
literally making shit up as I talk. No. Excuse the language. But it is a factor, and a scrape will tell you a lot. The bigger the scrape, the more it's been worked, which means more mature bucks have used that scrape. That rub will tell you if it's on a little bush, a big buck, a mature buck will scrape a little tree and a big tree. A little buck will only scrape a little tree. That is how you have to read that. But, if you see a little bush tore up, it could be big Louie, doing what he wants to do. But if he's going to work those neck muscles, that big, strong, it's gonna get him does. It's gonna get rid of adversaries. He's gonna work that. He needs a big tree to leverage against to work that. So bigger the tree, obviously bigger the deer. But yeah, I mean the points is a big factor. The tine length up top is a big factor. Yeah.
So you can use a rub. You can make a rub yourself to call in a buck. Do you know that?
No, I'm intrigued.
So, long time ago when Dad was hunting, he's told the story 1,000 times. I've told the story 1,000 times. He was going out into the woods, going to go bow hunting, putting up his tree stand late. I don't know if it was a climber or I don't even think they had climbers back then. He's putting up a platform stand. And he had a couple of sticks in his way on a popple tree, broke them off, tossed them to the ground. He's like, okay, I'm here. I'm ready. I'm hunting. 2 or 3 minutes later, he sees just out of range where he could see a deer, the top of a popple tree start just shaking, just going back and forth. So based off that little bit right there, what can we gather with that information? We know that a single popple tree shaking is a buck making a rub. That's all. That's just what it is. Okay, you could hear it. But why did that buck suddenly make a rub? It just happened to be in the right place at the right time, or was that buck laying there chewing his cud? It's about 3:30, 2 o'clock, whatever time Dad's getting on stand, and he suddenly hears what sounds like to him a young buck being a pain in the butt, making noise. He's like, wait a second. Nobody makes noise here but me. I'm the king. Just like you said, those little bucks won't use that scrape because somebody else is a king. So he heard what he thought was a young buck being disrespectful. So he got up and said, hey, shut up. I'm king here. You gotta be respectful to me. Now, if Dad had known that at that time, he didn't figure it out till a long time later. Could he have had an antler with, rubbed it on the tree, or broke a couple of sticks? Would that buck have come in? There's a high likelihood. Because dominant bucks demand that you're humble in their presence. It's not a question. It's a demand.
And if you don't, they're going to correct that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like how I run my household. No. It is interesting, and you have to realize that in the woods, if there's a buck fight, and I mean even those little spikers, that does make noise. Mm-hmm. And it's not always just antler. It's not always antler. It's not always antler that makes that noise that intrigues them. It's the rustling of the leaves. It's the broken branches. It's the grunting. It's the huffing. The stomping. It's the creation. So just a tip when you're rattling, the better the realistic picture you paint. I mean, this, and it's probably going to hurt everybody's ears on podcasts, but
no, your mic's not picking it up at all.
No? All right. Well, I'm trying to rattle, but that little bit of a tickle is great, and that will help. But painting the whole picture. So that buck that your dad's seeing, go ahead.
That tickle works in September. So there's 3 ways to rattle, okay? In September, light little tickling of the tines like that. That's when bucks are being more social. Like, hey, how you doing? Are we going to fight this fall? They'll click their antlers together a little bit, then they'll lick each other's face, and they're getting along fine. Towards middle of October, early October, middle of October, you'll get more of a quick clash together, click, click, pull away, and that's it. And that'll be it. You won't hear anything else. But what that is Buck A is following Buck B through the woods. Buck A ticked off Buck B briefly. They clash for 2-3 seconds, but they don't want to fight. Buck B is just like, hey, get off my butt.
There's no girl to fight over at that point.
Exactly.
There's no life. Breeding is a life or death situation for them.
Mm-hmm.
And 1st of October to the 15th or 20th, whatever day you want to argue, there's no girls yet. There's no issues. So
nobody cares.
It's tickle. Ooh, I'm overpowered. I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm. So then you come up to the rut, and now that's when you got to start doing your rattling, like you were saying. And what we'll do is we'll go rattle with 2 people, never with one, with 2 people. One guy with a gun or a bow, depending on the time on the season, and the other guy lays on his back in the woods with a big set of antlers, not a rattling bag. That doesn't do the trick. Big set of antlers, but you don't want to use a set of antlers bigger than the buck you're targeting, because you can tell how big a buck is from how his antlers sound, and they know that too.
They're basically tuning forks.
Mm-hmm.
They very much are. That tone resonates through a deep, dark woods. We're getting onto like rattling techniques. Anyways, go ahead.
Anyway, so we'll lay on our back, we'll clash the brush, smash the antlers together, click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, breathe heavy, kick your feet, lay right on your back, swing out at the brush, make it sound like a fight. Life and death fight is the goal, which is kind of where you were going with that anyway.
Yeah, and I just, them 2 spikes tussling on camera, that created some chaos, a little bit of like, what's going on in here in those woods. So, but those scrapes are community we've had does there. I've had spikes there. I've had bigger bucks there. Like I said, once the spikes realized the big buck had used it, they've kind of stayed off it. But that's a watering hole. That's a local area for them to come check, and that's a great thing to hunt on. But you can't look for those in June. They're not there. That's not what's going on. So if you look for scrapes and rubs in June, rubs you can see the year after, and you can say, okay, this is where the rubs happen. But you want to look for fresh sign this time of year, and it's just happening. I mean, especially down here, the last 2 weeks, I've seen does running on camera, bucks on their butts. She's not ready, but he's like, hey, cutie, and so they're trying to get their territory too. Because so to your dad's point, or to the story about your dad, that buck's like, he got up and he was like, I just heard some ruckus. I'm the hoss. And then if your dad would have broke some branches and been like, no, I'm hoss, he would have definitely came over and been like, he's going to try to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously if he realizes there's a bigger buck, he'll step off, or maybe he'll fight to the death. That depends on his mood,
depends on the
and
attitude.
his personality. So Ace, so our main target buck at my property, Ace, I have decided he is a passive deer. He is not an aggressor. He is not, I think he's the most mature, but he is not the most dominant buck. I honestly believe that. So, if you go in there with bigger antlers and you rattle, or a big buck hits a scrape, and you're trying to target not the biggest buck, it's going to make it a little bit harder. Mm-hmm. So, another sign that we can talk about is bedding. The beds themselves, not bedding area, but the bed itself. And on this property I was talking about with this scrape, super cool, in my opinion, to see it all. Stop that yawning stuff. Well, super cool thing that I finally got to see, like, it work through. And normally I've had this theory, but to see it work is awesome. I found some doe beds. Their beds were to the back of like this little pine growth that's about 4 to 5 feet tall, but you could tell, if you look at a bed, you can look at the curve. The front is flat, which is where their legs are, mm-hmm. and the back is curved, usually. You notice it more in the snow. But you can see that their back was to the pines, which was total security from the other side. And they're looking over the clear open ridge, and they can see everything. So I found those. That's really cool to see. This is where the does are bedding. They're putting their back to that. Great. That wind was coming over their back and going in front of them. I walked down a little ways, and on this same old logging road that I found was these scrapes. Mm-hmm. Why are them scrapes there? Do you know?
So you're saying that the beds they could see the scrapes from where the beds are?
I wouldn't say that you could see them, no. But they were down, the scrapes were downwind of the doe beds.
So downwind, so they can smell the does, they know the does are there, they want to tell the other bucks what's going on.
So that buck walked down that easy trail, was downwind of the bedding area, was putting his nose up, and he was checking, are there does in there? Are they hot? Are they in heat? Is it a mature doe? Is it a fawn? Whatever they can tell from smell. But they're downwind of that, and he's down there. He's like, I like this area. He's marking these scrapes because he's going to come back and check his scrapes because he doesn't want another buck walking down that same road, or that. He's like, this is my spot, and meanwhile he's smelling upwind to see if she's there. So the way you hunt that, if you can paint that picture, and I'm talking 150 yards from the doe beds, you can paint this picture. Now you be downwind of his scrapes. Mm-hmm. So it'll be a Tuesday night. He's going to come up. He's going to run that trail. He's going to check his scrape line. He's going to be downwind of the does. So he'll be sniffing to see if they're in heat or what their situation is. You're downwind of that trail. Your access is downwind of that trail. And then he walks through to check the scrapes. That's when you get your shot. So it was really cool to see the bedding. Bedding is a key thing. This is where they're at. Mm-hmm. So what you can tell from a bed, and I won't do that. I won't do this during hunting season or anytime, basically September 1st on.
Mm-hmm.
Get in that bed, lay down, get to their height. What can they see? Why is her back to the pines? Well, because she's safe. They have to come around, predators or hunters have to come around them pines, the corners, that she can bail.
Mm-hmm.
Or she doesn't even need to see them. She'll bail before that. And she has this pine to separate them. It's an edge.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you get down in those beds and you can really see what they see and why they sit there. Why are they okay with that spot? I won't do it now, but definitely in the winter, late season or midsummer, I will definitely check that stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then bucks are different than that. Bucks are a little farther away. So, beds can tell you a lot too. So
yeah, so you got to take all of the information you're getting from the deer and kind of mesh it together and figure out exactly what they're doing, which leads us into patterning. Oh, bye. Well, I guess I'm finishing it off by myself. So this is good. Kyle has left the building. We'll try to get him back here. What did you do?
Kyle's not here right now.
I noticed.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what button I pushed, but I just was like, nope, I'm out. See you, bye. Are you still on podcast?
Yep, still recording.
Oh, this is going to be a fun one.
Yep.
Do you want Kyle?
Yeah, I'd prefer Kyle.
All right, apologize. I was trying to make the noise on my laptop go away, and I pushed a button and got off the podcast. So,
yeah, so we were saying you got to take all the sign and put it together and get basically a picture so you can pattern your deer. Those two kind of go really hand in hand. You got to use the signs to pattern your deer. So with patterning, different conditions are going to lead to different results with your deer movement, right? So like if the wind direction changes, the deer are going to behave differently that day versus the day that they normally have with the wind.
Yep. They eat 5 times a day. The most important one, in my opinion, is the third one, which is they're transitioning from bedding in the evening, right before dusk, to their main food source. Mm-hmm. Now, before they hit the main food source, they want to hit a high-quality food source, which would preferably be food plots, right? I mean, whatever you got, radishes, turnips, alfalfa, corn, soybeans, whatever that is. You want to hit that, then they want to go to the big ag, where it makes them most vulnerable. But the weather can change when those feeding periods go. And these cameras, these Tactacam cameras, have changed it considerably for me because I can almost keep track of it. Crazy story with Ace. I was at home on a Sunday. I had a migraine. My migraines, just same with a sore knee, is based on pressure. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go hunting that night. It was perfect weather. Pressure's up. I decided not to. Ace came in. Early, daylight, beautiful deer. 2 weeks ago, migraine. I didn't go sit. Ace came in. Now, I'm not patterning Ace off my migraines, but the weather is creating, whatever the weather is doing to give me a migraine, is creating a situation where Ace wants to get up earlier and come out in daylight. So that weather will push these 5 feedings happen, 100%. Mm-hmm. But 1, 2 are in their beds normally. Mm-hmm. 4 and 5 is also on their retreat back to their beds. So it's 4 and 5 is at night. 1's in the morning. They might be coming back to go to their beds, so they're hitting the food plots or whatnot. That's early sun rising right there. That's number 1. Number 2, let's just average it at 10, 11 o'clock. They stand up, they stretch, they get situated. Because, even us, if we lay in bed all day, we get tired and sore. Mm-hmm. They get up and they'll eat whatever within that 10, 15 yards of their bedding, and they'll resituate and lay back down. That's 1 and 2. And then 3 is right at that nighttime. But These signs will tell you whether they're coming and going off the food plot. Like you said with the rub, if you're on the food plot and you see the rubs, they went from the food plot into their bedding.
Mm-hmm.
That tells you that they go off that way. They want to go that way in the morning. That evening, they might come out of there and go in the other side, and that's where the main food source is, and they're going to the east side rather than the west side.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting with Ace that we're patterning him to know when he's going to come out super early. I mean, he's always borderline morning, borderline night, but an hour and a half before sunset, something distinctive happened with him. We had a great storm the other day. So we got snow, it got cold, but then we got warm and we had a huge thunderstorm come through. 3 days, it was nasty rain, nasty wind. And it finally leveled out. And I'm like, tonight is going to be a great night for deer movement. Because those deer still need to feed five hours a day. They still need to chew their cud. They still need to cycle through that system. But if that storm's ripping through, they're not going to get up. They don't want to move any farther than they have to. So they're hungry. So once that storm subsided, what's the pattern? They're going to get up. And instead of that third feeding being at, right now it would be 6:30, which is just at dark, can't really see. It's not legal shooting hours. But after that storm, now it's going to be 4:30, because they're hungry. They haven't eaten in 2 days what they want to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So that pattern comes in. My migraines tell me the pressure is going high, which usually means a storm has, come and gone.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting up early for that reason. So they're going to go, you have to try to find a pattern with them. It's very vague. I'm talking about 3 instances with this deer so far this year, since the summer pattern. Summer pattern he was in every day. But
3 instances where his pattern differed from before that made him more huntable.
Yes, and it was, and now basically, all jokes aside, I'm going to wait till my next migraine, and I'm going to make sure I'm in the stand, because I can bet he will come out early, and that's obviously when I'm hoping to harvest him. But we're talking 4 times it's going to happen in a year, but it is a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
I had a buck one year that I only seen him when it was a straight out of the east wind, which never happens up here.
Yeah.
But never happens. It happens, but it's rare.
Yeah.
But what happened was, where he was bedding, he would walk out of that bedding with the wind in his face to the west, with the wind coming out of the west, which is a standard wind here, or normal wind here. Mm-hmm. But he would walk face into the wind and he would go eat there. And if we got us from the east wind, he would walk with the wind to his face and come to me. That's the only time I ever seen him. So I watched my weather. Here we go. We're looking at it. Tuesday's an east wind because of a weird whatever's going on. He came in. He could have been harvested that day. He was ornery, and he only wanted to walk with the wind in his face. So that was a pattern. But that wasn't very often. I seen them 3 times that year, on camera, obviously. I never did harvest them, but I seen them three times that year, east wind every time.
Huh.
So.
And it's not so much that they can tell time. It's they have things that they like. So walking with their face into the wind. They like doing that because they can smell everything. And that's not every deer. Some deer don't care as much, and some deer do care more, like obviously that one did. Ace, he doesn't like moving before it's daylight now, or before it's much during the day. Now, that could be, is it possible Ace, he's a little more timid, that's what you've been saying. Is it possible he got his butt kicked really bad as a yearling, and now he's like, I don't like that anymore. So he's going to try to be, I'm going to go out when nobody else is out. I want to be the last one out, make sure nobody else is out there, it's going to hurt me. Not realizing that he's the big boy out there now.
Right, and antler size doesn't dictate, and you say it too, antler size does not dictate
attitude, the
aggressive maturity of that animal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll write Ace off as a passive deer. I had a tangent or little thing. I had a taxidermist tell me about the biggest deer that was in his in his studio. I was like, I can't believe this deer. It scored like 198 inches. But the thing was massive. It probably weighed 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. Now, in the wild, that's usually unnormal in Wisconsin, but it is possible. But a 300-pound deer is possible. He's like, the deer weighed 300 pounds, scored 198 inches. It looked odd next to all these other animals. The neck, 26 inches round, massive deer, stupid deer. He goes, yep, but I want you to realize this with this deer. I bet this buck never bred. For exactly what you said. He was a yearling, got his butt whooped. He was a passive deer. Mm-hmm. The reason he got big is because he was 6, 7, 8 years old, whatever age he was. But he wasn't the buck that ever went chasing the does because he always got beat up. He doesn't know he has the biggest antlers. Mm-hmm. If he was 1 year old and got his butt whooped, if he was 2 years old and got his butt whooped, he's going to quit fighting people. Or, he's going to quit fighting other deer. So that he goes, I don't think that buck ever bred a doe. I don't think he ever rutted hard. And because he wasn't out risking his life to rut or to breed during the rut, he never got shot and got old and got big. So that deer, when the pressure came, went into the deepest, darkest hole and hid and probably borderline starved during gun season. Because there's no way I'm going to fight a buck for a doe. I'm not going to fight another mature buck. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get shot. To paint these personalities on these deer seems really weird, but based on everything at the deer farm, it is 100%. These deer have personalities.
Absolutely, they do. I don't know if I've told these stories on the podcast before, but we've had yearling bucks that were so full of piss and vinegar, for lack of a better term, that they would try to get themselves killed immediately. We've had yearling bucks attack 4-year-old bucks. We've had other bucks that are like, I don't care. So passive about everything that they never tried anything. We've had bucks disappear in the hunting preserve for months at a time, an entire summer one time, summer and fall, because he got beat up by everybody. He's like, I just won't eat. It's fine. Mm-hmm. I'll just stay back here. And basically, they're pouting. So sometimes those pouters are the biggest bucks out there because they've lived longer. Because they have, not because they're smarter. This is a whole conversation we'll have at some point too. Deer aren't that smart. We like to say they're that smart. They're not that smart. It's not because he's smarter than everybody else and he's waiting to make sure nobody else is going to get killed and he saw his buddy get shot by a hunt. He's not. It's none of that. He's pouting because somebody beat him up, and he doesn't want to get beat up again, so he's just not going to go. We all have friends like that. Like, in high school, I got bullied. I'm not going. Why would I go? I don't want to go there. Same thing.
And for everybody listening, they're wondering why we're talking about a deer's personality, but how that determines from signs and patterning. But if you look at this deer with a personality, figure out his personality, figure out who he is or what he does, you can pattern him that much easier. So I'm hunting Ace, and he's not harvested yet, but he was never the deer closest to the camera. He was never the deer in the middle of the food plot. Why? Because Brutus, another 8-pointer that's there, I think he was always the one front and center. He was always getting the best spot in the food plot. He was always getting the best spot in the woods. He was never the first one on the food plot, but when he walked out, he got the best spot. Mm-hmm. But Ace is not that way. So based on camera photos and videos, I can see Ace is timid. So right now, the rut's kind of kicking off. Does are getting kind of wild. Little bucks are getting scrappy. Do I grab my antlers and go rattle? Not if I want to shoot Ace. Ace will hightail it the opposite direction if I rattle and he's a passive deer. Mm-hmm. Exactly that. If the wind is the wrong way, quote unquote, for all the other deer, Ace knows that he can get out there without having to fight anybody for food. Mm-hmm. He knows if he gets out there at 5:30 in the afternoon before anybody else, he doesn't have to deal with the social pressure that the deer, including mature does, they're the biggest bitchs out there next to a big, bad, mature buck. They are mean, absolutely horrible animals. But he doesn't want to fight her on it. So he's going to come out early when it's right. But when you learn these personalities of these deer, and it's really hard, especially if you don't get to sit in a stand 24/7. But if you know how to look at key things when it comes to cameras, videos, if you do get to see him out in person on a stand, watch how he interacts. Because if you learn the personality, you can learn the pattern and learn how to hunt him. I'm not going to rattle for Ace. Honestly, I'm not even going to really focus on trying to pretend that there's a hot girl out there. I'm going to go when no other deer are sitting there, the wind's in his favor, and that's when I'm going to catch him, is at an hour and a half before dark, when there's no other deer out there. He's going to come out, he's going to be by himself. And that's how he has been up until now. He is in there pouting, 100% guarantee that. So the personality thing matters because that's how you get to help pattern. The other buck I'm talking about that only came with the east wind, I mean, he told you how to do it. Now, would you rather go hunt him on the west wind? Yeah, but I didn't have access to that property, so I'm limited that way. The percentage of getting that buck on an east wind or besides an east wind, was really low. Yep. So he wasn't a realistic target buck. What's other instances? Do you have any that, as far as patterns?
Patterns. I know personally I don't like to sit in the morning because oftentimes up here, your morning sits, you're normally sitting waiting for a deer to come off the field, off a big egg or a big food plot or something, and go back to their bedding. And normally they've done that before the sun comes up. So if you're going to do a morning sit, know how your deer behave in your area, which is patterning. So if we're going to do a morning sit here, we like to be back farther in the woods and catch them moving from the food to their bedding area. We don't like to be on the edge of a field because they're already in the woods by the time we get there. By the time we get out to the tree stand, they've already been out there all night long eating. Nights are getting longer. They're like, we're going to go. We're already in the woods. So with our ability to access with the four-wheeler that we've talked about before, we can get in behind them and wait for them to come through in the morning. So you do got to know the deer's pattern for your area. Are they still on the fields right away in the morning, or are they deep in the woods already? And set up your stands accordingly. Set up your sits accordingly. If they're still in the field, if you can drive out at 7:30 in the morning, 8:30 in the morning when the sun's up, cruising around a week before season, and see 40 deer in a field, well, you can sit right on the edge of a field. You'll probably be just fine. But if you drive around in the morning and you never see deer, they're probably already in the woods. You want to set up in the woods to hunt them. You have to abide by their pattern, not expect them to change to yours. Because when you enter the woods, you're in their world.
And, a point for seeing the deer on the fields is if you pull up, you notice if you drive by a field, the deer stay out there. They don't care. Yep. If you hit the brakes and slow down, they're going to start paying attention to you. So watch them run. Watch them. If they want to get up and out of dodge because you're stopped and you maybe got your binos up on them, notice they'll run clear across the field to go back to where they want to go. They'll run straight there and go to that edge and go in. They're not going to go to the shortest distance to thick. They might, only if the pressure's extreme on them. But if you're just parked there, they would rather run across the field to get back to the edge they want to go in. So if you're trying to access public land or your property, even if it's your field, don't go on the right side. Don't go on the north side. Go where they, under pressure, they retreat back to because they're going to be there. For simplistic terms, as far as morning sits, anything and everything that's said about how to hunt deer is out the window for the rut.
Yep.
Weather does not matter. She's an estrus. He's on her. Does not matter. It doesn't matter if it's rain, snow, sunny, hot, cold. If she's an estrus, hunt. Morning, night, 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock, morning, afternoon, does not matter. All of it's out the window. But for simple terms, if the sun rises at 7 o'clock and it sets at 7 o'clock, I can tell based on my cameras that my deer come between 5 p.m. They're there during the 7 p.m. sunset, and they go on throughout the night. And they visit if they visit at 7, then they visit or if they visit at 6, they're more likely going to visit at 11 at night because that's their 5th or their 4th feeding. Then you'll see them again, a rush of them at 3, because that's their 5th feeding. But if it's, again, 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock at night, I rarely get pictures of deer at 7:02. Never. It's always after 6:50, the deer dissipate. So why would I want to go out there at 5:30, 6 o'clock, get in the dark, sit there? When the sun finally comes up, they're already all gone. And then risk busting them off the food plot or busting them out of the woods when you're accessing. Mornings are a very big risk because they're there right now. Rarely do you see, if the sun rises at 7, do you see them coming through at 8? Especially for like patterning them. If there's a fluke, yes, but pattern, rarely. They're usually back within 50 yards of their bedding at that sunrise set. But evenings, they're going to come out a little early because they're trying to travel farther. Mm-hmm. So, and if the weather pushes them one way or another, so there's a feeding at 5, there's a feeding at 11 at p.m., excuse me. There's a feeding at 3 a.m. There's a feeding on their way back at 6, and then there's a feeding in their bed at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you're getting pictures of deer at 11 o'clock in the morning,
mm-hmm.
That's because you're really close to their beds. Because they're getting out there going 50 yards away, and if you're getting pictures of them, you are super tight to them. But if the weather in the morning isn't good,
mm-hmm.
and their 5 o'clock in the morning feeding, their 11 o'clock in the morning feeding doesn't happen because of the weather, they hunker down, you can bet if the weather clears up, that third feeding is going to happen considerably sooner
mm-hmm.
than what would be scheduled. And if that happens sooner, then the fourth, everything moves, and they'll slowly go back. But you can pattern them based on that weather and figure that out. If anybody is listening, has a reveal, start marking down on your calendar when you see the flurry of pictures come in.
Mm-hmm.
I am on 3 cameras, 3 different properties. And in the last 2 days, 3 o'clock in the morning, all the cameras lit up. The deer are all active on all 3 properties at 3 o'clock in the morning. And at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I see them again at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. All 3 cameras get active at the same time. Because, I mean, they're within miles of each other. They're close.
Mm-hmm.
If you're 15 miles north, it's going to be a little bit of a different situation. But they're all relatively close. But three cameras get active at the same time because it doesn't matter what's going on. Them feedings have to happen. So, but you can watch those cameras and pattern them based on that. So,
yeah, absolutely. Trail cams are huge for figuring out patterns because it just makes it so much easier. But you can use sign, you can use trail cams, self-scouting. Go sit. Go sit somewhere you haven't sat before. Go sit. Go drive by at a specific time every day and see what you see. That can all help get you gather information for patterning. There's been lots of times I've been told a story, same story, different guy every time. They say, hey, we've been seeing this buck in this field at 6:30 every day. Every day. Can't wait till rifle season. We're gonna get him. Well, Minnesota rifle season's the rut. They don't bow hunt. Never see the buck again. Well, yeah, he was patterned. He was on the field at 6:30 every day. But you didn't take the opportunity to get him because you either weren't able to or chose to not hunt the correct season when he was using that pattern. So pattern's great. Sign is great. The rut ruins everything.
It is. It's a total. Nothing matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's just nothing matters. I've heard people say that if it gets hot during the rut, the breeding cycle doesn't work. And let me ask you a question, Dylan, on the deer farm factor. Do you guys breed on the deer farm the same time every year?
Pretty much.
I'm almost to the day, right?
To the day.
So and a deer is.
So we can do a whole podcast on how deer are affected. What determines the deer breeding season, how they're affected, and what. I mean, the short answer is everything a white-tailed deer does is based off sunlight. That's the short answer. Okay. Go for it.
All right. You say that, and anybody that's doubting it, I want to ask you a question. Why do their leaves change color? It has nothing to do with temperature, has nothing to do with moisture, has nothing to do with that. It is all dictated. Trees changing their leaf color and dropping their leaves is based on sunlight and the amount of sunlight. So anybody that's like, Dylan doesn't know what he's talking about, deer don't care how much sunlight they have. I'm going to ask you, do you know that trees they change their leaves based on sunlight and that's the only thing?
So here's a question, okay? Well, I'll answer. I'm going to give you an answer to the previous question, then I'm going to ask you a question, okay? So you asked if we breed the same time every year. So I just got our AI schedule for this year at the farm. And for those of you that don't know, AI is artificial insemination, bias straw semen, long story short, impregnate a doe. A lot of different things that go into it. It's a lot more complicated than that. That's a whole nother thing too. I could talk about that for an hour. Every time we've done this, we've always AI'd between the 11th and 13th of November. Every time. Maybe the 10th once, but the 11th and 13th of November. Okay? So, we do that because that's when the wild deer are breeding in our area, and a gestation period for a white-tailed doe is 194 days. If a fawn is born 194 days from November 11th, that comes out to roughly May 20th, 25th, give or take, right in there. If a fawn is born in our area, 2 hours away is a different story. In our area, if a fawn is born May 5th, freeze to death. We've had snow on the ground on May 5th. A newborn fawn can't take it. They weigh 4 pounds. They'll freeze to death. If a fawn is born in July, yeah, their percentage of living is pretty good at that time. If they lay on the edge of a black field in July, they will die. They'll get heat stroke and die. But however, a fawn born in July or August, for those of you that hunt the second or third rut, they go into winter, Minnesota and northern Wisconsin winters, at 35 pounds when they should be 65 pounds. They're small, they don't know how to take care of themselves very well, and they don't do well.
And they're dependent on the mother.
They're dependent on the mother more. Yep. So, if I were to, we've done this, or if we haven't, somebody else has. If I were to take a doe from southern Minnesota, purchase her from another deer farm, we wouldn't do this right now, CWD, whole thing, long talk later. But even if we took one from Missouri, okay? Let's say we took one from Missouri, bought a deer in Missouri, she's having her fawns in April, I'm guessing. But that's when she has her fawns, because it's nice. Missouri's got way better weather than we do here. We move her up to here. That first fall, she comes into heat with all our does. She's coming to heat in October every year of her life. Why is she suddenly coming in heat in November? Sunlight. How much sunlight she gets every day. There's a study. I have to look it up one day. We'll do a whole podcast on how sunlight affects deer. But scientists somewhere, that's who the they is, caused a white-tailed buck to grow 3 sets of antlers in a 12-month period by limiting and changing how much sunlight he got every day. It's all sunlight. Everything is sunlight with white-tailed deer.
So what my point is, people say, "Oh, it was hot this year during the rut. The deer didn't breed as much. We didn't get as much deer activity. Hey, it was cold. The deer activity was crazy good." They're not like us. We don't need to be comfortable to breed. When it's time, it's time. When she's ready, he's ready. Go ahead.
So what they're seeing is the does are being more compliant because it's too hot to run away. They're still all getting bred, but they don't want to run a mile when it's hot out. It's cold, we'll tease them, we'll go a long ways. Does don't have to cooperate right away. They don't choose to cooperate right away all the time. If it's hot, they're going to play with the buck, make him work for it. If it's cold, they're going to make him work for it. If it's hot, they're like, nah, it's too hot. We'll just cooperate.
Yep.
They're all getting bred.
Well, and that's
there's
what,
a buck there.
And that's what we talk about the second and third ruts. Those factors happen. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's 30 days or 36 days after.
20 or 21 days after the first breeding.
Okay,
they come back into heat.
So I was off. But if she goes into heat on November 10th and she's not bred, she is not then impregnated, and she's not developing a baby, a fawn.
Mm-hmm.
21 days later, she goes through a second estrus.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that. And depending on your buck-doe ratio and depending on how well the does are bred, that's dictated by – some people never see a second or third rut.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, because their doe ratio and their buck ratio is different. But a buck that breeds a doe on the third rut or second rut, whatever you want to believe, that next year, 194 days later,
mm-hmm. That's where you get your August-born fawns.
Yep, and I had one at my house tonight. I looked at her. She's 40 pounds of soaking wet. She looks like she's got spots. And I'm just like, but that's because there's so many does in my area at my house. There's so many does, the bucks can't breed them. I got to imagine can't cover all of them.
Yeah, if there's not enough bucks.
So then the doe gets to her third cycle.
Mm-hmm.
He finally breeds her late fawn. So,
or it can even be a yearling fawn that came into heat. If a yearling doe fawn's doing well, she'll come into heat in December or even January.
Yep, and if she gets bred,
they don't always make it.
And natural selection tends to take care of that issue,
mm-hmm.
but with feeding and management and food plots and stuff like that, we're kind of like playing God there. But pattern when we got on a rut topic, which is probably good. We probably should do a rut podcast because there's these myths and legends to how the rut operates that are just false, and it's based on experiences 5 minutes in a tree stand. But
mm-hmm.
To your point on the 10th, I'm giving it the 10th to the 14th of that is the peak.
Peak of the rut.
What's the word? Peak of the rut. That's the peak of the breeding situation. You don't want to hunt that. He's got her locked down. He's probably trying to breed her. She's probably not cooperating, or finally is. You want to be up until that point when he's searching, because that's when you're going to get this buck activity, constantly moving around, checking does, checking downwind, like for the example on the property I was on. That's when you want to hunt. You don't want to hunt the peak rut, the peak breeding situation. That's not. She's laying in her bed, literally not wanting to move, and he is pawing at her, poking her, fighting her. Come on,
mm-hmm.
come on, let's go. Get up, because if she's up, she's moving. So my best day that I've ever seen, and I'll hold true to this, November 9th. I've seen more daylight pictures of mature big bucks on the 9th of November. And that's when it is. I will never miss the November 9th again. Now, here I have 3 stands to pick from, 3 different hunting locations to pick from. So I'm going to pick the wrong one because that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I will not miss November 9th. My boss, Tom, if you're watching this, I'm sick that day. Sorry. So
I'm going to schedule my sick day now.
Yep. But if anybody has questions on this stuff, I would love to do a podcast on myths, wise tales, legends, theories. I mean, and we're only going to give you our opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan's got a great expertise on dealing with this in a controlled environment, so he can give our opinion, November 10th to the 14th. That's it. Why is that? Okay, let's discuss that. I'm going to give you my opinion on my experiences, but if you want to bring up those myths and theories, we'd love to discuss them and hash them out, and maybe me and Dylan can get in an argument.
There we go. I know I'm going to have guys that live in southern Minnesota be like, oh, I have fawns born May 1st. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You're southern Minnesota.
Yes, that's a long...
You don't get as cold as it does here. You're 600 miles away.
Yep.
It happens. It's so funny. Back before Facebook was really a thing. Wow, I just aged myself. There were these things called forums, right? So I was on these deer farmer forums. They'd always have a fawn watch, and they'd start posting when they had their first fawns hit the ground in the forum, and it'd be like April 15th. We're like not South Dakota. It'd be like bottom of Iowa, April 15th. Then you just watch it work, and every next fawn hit, a little bit farther north, a little bit farther north, a little bit farther north, a little bit farther north. We were always the last ones to have fawns on the ground. Even if you go to Stan Tweet with, no, I'm not going to remember, Get the Big Buck, down in Plummer, he has fawns normally a week or two before we do. Just because he's an hour and a half away.
Sure.
But it's farther south, so their deer come into heat at different times. So yes, where you and I live, as far north as we are, it is that 10th to the 14th.
And I want to talk about a theory real quick. Since we're on this thing, let's let this podcast let's just go crazy.
Let's go.
It. Here's my theory, and I discussed this with a hunter yesterday or 2 days ago. I'm going to call it my hot spot theory. And the reason for a hot spot theory is so specific, like you're saying. An hour and a half below, fawns are being born at a different time. Mm-hmm. I know a hunter that I'm like, hey, you getting any rut activity? You seen anything going on? And he's like, no, not a thing. I want to explain this as best as I can. During this time frame, right, we're going into, in November 4th, this goes out, I think we're scheduled for.
This one.
So like we're literally hitting that perfect. So this is going to be posted good. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I call it the hotspot theory. I'm here in my location on my property, and there's a guy 2.5 miles away hunting his property. I see him. I go, hey, you got any rut activity? He goes, no, nothing. I go, wow, my property is lit up. Why is that? That's because a doe came into estrus on X amount of day. She's hot. She is ready to be bred. Within a mile circle, let's just say, and I'm being generic here so that nobody cut my throat with it, but within a mile circle, all of these bucks know she's hot. They're going to condense to her. Mm-hmm. And women do this. Their cycle, they all blend together. So now this doe gets hot, now her sister gets hot, now this other one gets hot, their mother gets hot. Within this mile radius, these bucks know this is a hot spot for does. These bucks are going to condense on this spot, and for 2 to 3 days, 4 days, my property is lit up with rut activity. Bucks are fighting, does are being bred, chasing, all of it. But Billy Bob down the road 2.5 miles away is like, I haven't seen a thing. No, because your one doe hasn't flipped the switch and gone into heat. So these bucks come in, they condense, one buck breeds her, or that whole cycle happens. Once them does are bred, the bucks disperse. Now they're going to cruise. But now Billy Bob had his girl that was in his food plot. Now she's hot. Mm-hmm. That mile circle comes over. Now he's going to be like, Kyle, the rut just happened. And it's today. And I'm like, well, the rut was last week. We're 2.5 miles apart. But the reason that is because those does are that much different, based on geographics, residential doe herd. Mm-hmm. That varies very closely within an hour, within 15 minutes, within 10 minutes of driving. So now his spot is hot. All that happens. Maybe them same bucks, maybe some of the different bucks, they condense. He gets all the activity. And that's happening everywhere. And I call it a hot spot theory because I can talk to a hunter the same day and be like, I've seen all the rut activity. He goes, I see nothing. Well, why? Mm-hmm. Because that doe. And when a doe gets hot, when she's in heat, the world is ending for these bucks. I mean, imagine us men watching this, listening to this podcast right now. Imagine waiting 364 days. Whoa, what are you going to... And then let's go to the bar and try to do the deed. That's what they're doing. It's going to be a melee. So my hotspot theory, I'm sure people are going to pick it apart and do it. I hope you do. And Dylan, tell me what you think. But that's why 2.5 miles apart can have different rut activity based on those does.
I think I've never seen anything like that here, but I have a much higher population, much denser population, so we tend to have everything hit at the same time over the whole 30-mile square county.
Okay.
However, in your area where your deer population is a little bit more out of whack, less bucks, more bucks, less does, they're going to be flocking to the does. Where here we have, I bet we have 3 does for every buck, minimum, up here.
We're 1-to-1 as far as I can tell.
Yeah, so where you're 1-to-1, you might have some more of that hotspot type activity where it's like, hey, she's in heat, guys. We got to go. Or up here, it's like, no, you take that one. I'll get these 3. We're fine.
And you talk about deer population. I'm going to say if I put out a map of Bayfield County, which is where I reside, and I'm going to put a red tack for every 10 deer. There, like at my property, there's 12 to 15 deer. But I would say there's probably not a bunch of deer within the next mile and a half around. And then there's another population of deer, residential deer herd there. Mm-hmm. And that intermingles, and then they move around a little bit. But there's these spots of populations. If it's not like a shotgun shot a target where it's just even layered through and they all intermingle.
Mm-hmm.
I have the same 12 deer on my property that I've had on all year.
Yeah.
And you have to travel a long ways away. I mean, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile away. Mm-hmm. You're going to find it. And you're not going to see another deer. Dead zones. I'd call them dead zones. There's no deer there. There's no habitat for them to be in. And also you're going to get a good piece of habitat, and there's another group. And that's maybe that's why it's causing this spotty breeding, where at your place you have more population. It's more spread even, mm-hmm. So they can all
I can drive the 6 miles between here and my dad's place, and if it's getting towards that evening hour, see anywhere from 40 to 100 deer every time.
And it's even, though, right? It's not like you get to one field and it's popular.
I mean, there might be one field that's got 25, but then there might be another one that has 15 or 10.
Yeah. See, here...
I think it was last season, I would go to Dad's. It was this year. It was this summer. It was one day this summer I was going over to Dad's, and I counted 72 or 74 deer between here and my dad's place.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's 6 miles.
Here we can go drive through one field, no deer. Drive through the next field, no deer. Next one, bunch of deer. But then the next field, no deer again. And I mean, I'm talking every night driving there and seeing the same thing every time. Like that area, that mile stretch of road, there's a reason there's a deer crossing sign. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why, if anybody that's local listening to this, we drive through barns. There's a reason we go the speed limit, because all the deer are there. But then between Drummond and Grandview, where my property is,
mm-hmm.
we all cruise at 65 because there's no deer there, and there's dead zones, 100% dead zones by me. So I'm going to hold to my hot spot theory on why
it makes really good sense for your area. I wouldn't prescribe to it here, but in a low density area, makes sense to me, because the bucks are like, oh my gosh, there's a girl over there. We gotta go.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, how far will a buck travel for a doe to go breed?
Long ways.
10 miles?
Yeah, easy. One of the nicer bucks I've ever shot. I should actually bring his head down here at some point. We'd never seen him before. Never had him on trail camera. He never showed up all summer long on our food plots. Nothing. And the only time we ever had him on trail camera was the morning I shot him. No idea where he came from. We've never even seen that genetic on our farm before. I'm saying in the wild. It was a 13-point buck. He had 2 splits off each G2. Never seen that before. Ever. How far did he go? No idea. He was beat up somewhere. He lost. So he started going until he could be the boss.
Yep. And they can go a long way. I mean, you got to figure a nice steady walk. 1 mile takes 24 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That deer can go 10 miles. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
They can cover that in an evening or a night. They can walk a lot faster than us. But sorry we got on a rut tangent.
It's a good time to do it, because it's like, next week.
Yep, it's here. I'm gonna shoot something this. I'm gonna shoot something this weekend, which is before this gets posted. But
yes, you're gonna shoot something last weekend.
Yeah, let's do that. I hope so.
We are gonna. I think we gotta wrap it up here. We went an hour and 20.
Woo!
This is a long one.
if we did cover two things, signs and
Yeah.
patterning, and well, three things, signs, patterning, and rut. But it is currently 8:25 as you're listening to this. So I really hope after you cancel, you click out of this podcast, you go to 10 Point Whitetails Facebook page, you find our brochure or our pamphlet, click on the link, sign up, send me $5 so we can get as many people on this buckboard as possible. Last minute, last chance. Maybe we should give a prize out to the last person to register before closeout.
There
What
will
do
be
you
like
think?
50 people that sign up at 12:58.
11:58, hopefully.
Yeah, 11:58.
Otherwise, but thanks everybody for listening. It's been a long one, but I think we should do that. If you have Dylan posted a Q&A post, go find that, comment on it, tell us what you want to hear. If you want to hit up the hotspot theory, if you want to hit up, any of the stuff we discussed, or you have questions or want to just argue with us, help us out. We'll pick it apart and give you what we think.
And maybe after deer season, we'll schedule a live podcast. I think we're getting comfortable enough where we could pull that off and see if anybody asks questions, or we'll just ramble the whole time and maybe nobody will ask questions there either. But who knows? We'll see. So anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. We're going to close out here. Go join the buckboard. This episode was sponsored by Wallhanger Taxidermy of Cable, Wisconsin. Does good work over there. And yeah, we're going to be signing off. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on TikTok. Everything is at 10 Point Whitetails. We have an email, 10pointwhitetails@gmail.com. You can send us questions there, send us emails, whatever. Just not spam. Don't send us like a bunch of spam. It'd be really funny if somebody sent us a bunch of spam images of like canned spam. That'd be funny.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Lessons of the Woods comes out every week, every Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time. And I think that's it. That's all I got for plugs, right? Did I miss anything?
Go Pack, go.
No. Well, you guys can maybe use some help this year. It's been rough.
Oh,
Granted, there's going to be two games after this. But you guys play the Bills this Sunday, but it'll be last Sunday.
I feel like a Vikings fan today.
Now you know. It's like, yeah, we're kind of good, but not really. I don't know. We played the Cardinals, so we'll see. Okay, we played the Cardinals. I'm hoping this is a win. Find out. Future me knows nothing. Okay, thank you guys for watching. We'll be back next week.